There are people in your life right now who are slowly poisoning your peace. You don't notice it at first. It begins in whispers, subtle doubts, passive jabs, half-hearted support disguised as care. But over time, the weight of their energy buries you. You start second-guessing your worth. You start playing small to stay accepted. You start surviving instead of becoming. And the worst part? You think it's normal. You think this is love. You think this is loyalty. But the truth is, peace has a price. And sometimes the price is them. Not everyone deserves a seat at the table of your rebirth. And not everyone can follow you to the life you were meant to build. Watch till the end, hit subscribe, and remember, the real change begins now. You don't notice them at first. They come quietly, with soft eyes and familiar smiles. They call you by name, remember your birthday, check in when you're low. And so you trust them. You let them in, not realizing they're not here to build you, they're here to keep you exactly where you are. These are the silent assassins of your potential, the ones who never raise their voice, but always lower your flame. They disguise their doubt as concern. They question your dreams, not because they care, but because they don't understand them. And what people don't understand, they usually try to control or kill. The slow drain. They won't sabotage you outright. That would be too obvious. No, they do it in moments. Little jabs, quiet withdrawals, words wrapped in kindness, dipped in poison. Don't get your hopes up. Maybe you should be more realistic. You've changed. And at first you don't push back, you make excuses for them. They're just worried, they love me, they're trying to help. But deep down, something starts to shift. You begin to shrink. Not visibly, but spiritually. Your edges blur, your certainty fades. Not because you failed, but because you believed them. You started to confuse their comfort with connection, their history with loyalty, their presence with love. But love that dims you isn't love, it's fear, trying to keep you small enough to stay controllable. When loyalty becomes a cage, you stay because they've been there. You stay because you don't want to hurt them. You stay because you're scared of what happens when you outgrow them. But let me tell you something few people will. Outgrowing people doesn't make you a villain. It makes you alive. There's a difference between someone who roots for you and someone who needs you to never rise. One waters your soul. The other builds a cage out of their own insecurity and calls it love. And if you're not careful, you'll mistake that cage for home. The turning point? You're not imagining it. You feel it for a reason. Every time you speak your truth and they look away, you feel it. Every time they change the subject, when you talk about what sets your soul on fire, you feel it. You feel it because it's real. And here's the part that hurts. They might never understand. They might never change. But your peace does not require their permission. Your growth is not a group decision. The quiet breakthrough, you don't have to make a scene. You don't owe them a dramatic goodbye. Just stop explaining yourself. Stop asking for support from people who only know how to hold you in your suffering, not in your becoming. Choose the discomfort of growth over the slow death of staying small. You've carried their doubts long enough. Now ask yourself, whose voice are you still listening to? And what is it costing you? Maybe it's time to walk away, not out of anger, but out of clarity, because the life you're called to won't wait forever. There's a weight you carry, and for the longest time, you thought it was yours. But it isn't. It's the weight of rooms you sit in, conversations you return to, people you keep around out of habit, guilt, or history, people who survive through pain and expect you to do the same. It doesn't start with arguments. It starts with repetition, the same stories, the same complaints, the same bitterness, recycled week after week. Every time you try to rise, it drags you back. Every time you speak of healing, they speak of betrayal. Every time you talk about building something new, they whisper, "What's the point?" And you begin to bend. Not all at once, slowly. Like a tree leaning toward dead soil, trying to survive where it no longer belongs. When misery feels like home, some people don't know who they are without suffering, and they won't know who you are if you stop suffering with them. So they keep the echo chamber alive, not because they hate you, but because your growth terrifies them, because your healing reminds them of their wounds, because your peace exposes the noise they've buried themselves in. You've seen it. You've felt it. You bring light into the room, and suddenly the temperature changes. They look at you different. You don't belong to the old rituals anymore. You've stepped outside the script, and they don't know how to hold you without your pain. So they mock your clarity. They question your peace. They laugh at your new language, calling it a phase, or worse, pretending it's arrogance. But what they really mean is, don't leave me behind. The shift no one talks about, growth is lonely, because at some point you stop bonding through wounds and realize how much of your life was built on shared suffering, not shared vision. You stop bleeding just to belong. And the echo chamber, once familiar, even comforting, starts to sound like a trap. And here's the truth no one prepares you for. You will miss them. You will miss the old rhythm. But don't mistake the rhythm for a heartbeat. Just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's right. Just because it echoes doesn't mean it's truth. The quiet breakthrough, there comes a moment when you must stop attending the conversations that keep you small. Not out of judgment, but out of necessity. You can love people and still outgrow the world they choose to live in. The echo chamber wants your silence. Your evolution requires your voice. So, here's the question you need to sit with. Are you staying loyal to people or to your potential? Because you can't serve both, and at some point, you will have to walk out of the noise, not because you've changed too much, but because they never intended for you to change at all. There's a certain kind of love that doesn't feel like love, but you don't realize it until it's too deep to walk away clean. It looks like care. It sounds like concern, but it tightens around you with every step you take toward your own life. That's not love. That's a leash. And the hardest part, it comes from someone you once trusted with your soul. When love starts to hurt, they say they're just trying to help. They say they want what's best for you. But somehow, what's best always means what makes them comfortable. You try something new, they pull you back. You speak your truth, they flinch or get quiet. You set a boundary suddenly, you're selfish. This isn't just disagreement. It's disapproval dressed in affection. And deep down, you begin to feel it. The cost of their love is your obedience. You start shrinking in their presence. You rehearse your words before you speak. You live in emotional negotiation, trading pieces of yourself just to keep the peace. The manipulation you can't explain. They don't yell, they don't rage, they don't hit. No, they withdraw, they guilt. They punish you with silence, with disappointment, with a well-timed sigh or a cold shoulder that freezes your whole day. And when you confront it, they say you're overreacting, that you are the problem. Suddenly you're apologizing for needing to breathe. This is emotional blackmail. It's love with strings. Love that says only if you follow their rules, only if you make yourself smaller, only if you dim what makes you dangerous to their control. The realization they didn't want you to have. They never truly loved you. They loved the version of you they could manage, the version that fit inside their fears. Because when you began to grow, when you stopped asking for permission, their affection faded. Not because you became someone worse, but because you became someone free. And freedom threatens those who only feel powerful when you're beneath. You have to stop calling this love. Because love doesn't monitor. Love doesn't silence. Love doesn't clip your wings and call it protection. The quiet decision, this isn't about revenge. It's not even about confrontation. It's about recognition, seeing the pattern for what it is, and choosing, finally, to stop repeating it. Let them sulk. Let them shame. Let them weaponize their silence. But you walk, not to prove anything, not to make a statement. You walk because staying would mean dying with your eyes open. They won't understand. They'll call you cold. They'll say you've changed. And they'll be right. You have changed. You're no longer willing to bleed to make someone else feel safe. So the next time they target that invisible leash, ask yourself this. If love requires your silence, who are you becoming just to be loved? And is that really the kind of love you want to live with? You owe them everything, don't you? That's the voice you've carried for years. Quiet, relentless, and buried beneath every decision you delay. You remember what they did, how they showed up when no one else did. You remember the sacrifices, the times they put you first. But memory is not a leash. And guilt. Guilt is not a reason to drown where you were meant to rise. When the debt is emotional, they raised you, they helped you, they were there. And for that, you carry this invisible weight, not because they asked, but because somewhere along the way, You believed your freedom would make you ungrateful. So you stay. In conversations that leave you numb, in environments that steal your peace, in patterns where your growth feels like betrayal. You silence yourself to preserve the past, even as it poisons the present. But here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. Some debts were paid long ago. And every time you delay your evolution for the sake of someone else's comfort, you're sacrificing your future on the altar of old loyalty. The difference between gratitude and obligation. Gratitude is sacred, but obligation, when soaked in guilt, becomes corrosive. It eats at your clarity. It clouds your choices. It convinces you that suffering is noble, that staying is love. But love is not a transaction. And guilt should never be the currency. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your stagnation, especially not those who use your past as a way to control your present. You can love them. You can thank them. But you do not have to stay small to prove it. When guilt becomes a cage, some people only feel powerful when you feel indebted. They remind you of what they gave, not because they cherish you, but because they fear losing the version of you they could manage. And so every step you take toward freedom becomes, in their eyes, disrespect. Every dream you speak aloud becomes rebellion. Every no sounds like betrayal. But that's not your truth. That's their fear. And if you keep shrinking to protect their fear, you will eventually disappear inside a life that was never yours to begin with. The quiet exit, leaving, doesn't mean you've forgotten. Setting a boundary doesn't erase the past. It simply means you refuse to let the past chain your soul to a life that no longer fits. You can walk away and still carry love. You can choose peace without bitterness. And you can honor the road that brought you here without confusing it for the destination. So ask yourself this, quietly, honestly. Are you staying out of love or out of guilt? And if it's guilt, is it worth your light? Because no one who truly loves you would ever want to see you stay in the dark just to keep them comfortable. You don't always notice it at first. The weight doesn't drop all at once, it accumulates. Little sighs after phone calls. That tension in your chest before a visit. The exhaustion that hits you after spending time with someone who never raised their voice but still left you feeling hollow. That's the trap. They don't need to hurt you, to drain you. They just have to stay close enough to feed off your light. When the thief is soft-spoken, some energy thieves don't yell. They don't belittle. They just keep needing your time, needing your attention, needing your emotional labor. And you give, because that's who you are, someone who shows up, someone who listens, someone who carries more than most. But what starts as compassion becomes consumption. They don't grow from your support, they depend on it. They make you their oxygen and call it connection. And slowly, piece by piece, you shrink so they can stay whole. Others, they smother with silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that manipulate. The kind that makes you question if you did something wrong, that leaves you chasing approval you should never have to earn. And some use chaos like currency. Every conversation is a battlefield. Every story is about how they've been wronged. Every day is a new storm and you're the shelter. Always the shelter. But what about you? Who stands for you while you're busy saving everyone else from themselves? Tweetable insight. Not all energy thieves are cruel. Some just never learned how to carry their own weight, so they hand it to you with a smile. When giving becomes self-betrayal, you convince yourself it's kindness. That staying is loyalty. That silence is maturity. But deep down, you feel it, the slow leak of your own spirit. Your dreams feel heavier. Your mind grows foggy. You doubt yourself more than you used to. That's not age. That's not life. That's depletion, the kind that happens when you tolerate people who take without even knowing they're taking. And if you let it go on long enough, you forget what wholeness feels like. You forget what it's like to wake up without dread. You forget what peace feels like when no one is watching, pulling, needing, asking. The quiet decision, you don't have to fight them. You don't have to explain yourself. You just have to stop bleeding for people who would never offer a bandage. This isn't about revenge or coldness. It's about clarity. It's about realizing that your energy is sacred, your space is sacred, and not everyone deserves access to it. You are not cold for choosing peace. You are not cruel for setting limits. You are not selfish for reclaiming your light. So here's the quiet challenge. Look around. Who leaves you dimmer every time they're near? And more importantly, who would still be standing if you stopped pouring? You may not need to cut everyone off, but you do need to remember this. Your energy is not a buffet for people who are unwilling to feed themselves. There's a kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. It's the heaviness that builds when you carry everyone else's comfort on your back and bury your own truth beneath it. You smile when you want to scream. You agree when your gut twists in protest. You shrink not because you're small, but because someone else needed you to be less, just so they could feel more. When silence feels safer, they call it love. They call it duty. But deep down, you know the truth, it's survival. You've trained yourself to read a room faster than you read your own needs. You soften your voice, dull your edges, make yourself easier to digest. You've become fluent in discomfort, yours, not theirs. And the worst part, they don't even notice what it costs you, because you've made it look effortless. But it's not. It's bleeding in places no one can see. Tweetable insight. You weren't born to be agreeable, you were born to be honest. And sometimes, honesty offends those who live on illusion. The fire metaphor, you think if you keep the peace long enough, things will get better. That if you just absorb the blow, they won't have to feel it. But there's a difference between being strong and being flammable. And you've been setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. At first, it feels like love. Then it starts to burn. Not all at once, but over time. Your joy turns to ash. Your voice becomes a whisper. Your boundaries fade into suggestion. And you wonder why your spirit feels like a memory instead of a presence. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them struggle with your boundaries. Let them sit in the silence you no longer fill with explanations. Because here's the truth, no one tells you. Your discomfort has been the foundation of their convenience. And no, you don't owe anyone that anymore. The quiet breakthrough, the people who only love you when you're silent, don't love you. The ones who need you, broken to feel whole, they're not your people. And the parts of you that ache from being ignored, they're not weak. They're just tired of playing dead. It's not rebellion to choose yourself. It's remembrance. You're not here to be anyone's emotional cushion, their scapegoat, their mirror. You're here to live fully, fiercely, freely. So let this be the moment you stop apologizing for existing loudly. Let this be the night you sleep without guilt, not because they understand, but because you finally do. Here's your quiet challenge. Ask yourself who benefits when you disappear, and what would happen if, this time, you stayed visible, even if it made them uncomfortable, because you don't owe anyone your self-destruction. And peace built on your silence is not peace, it's a slow funeral. You were never meant to be a sacrifice. Some losses don't happen all at once. They happen in slow motion through unanswered calls, unmet needs, unspoken resentments, and by the time you realize what's missing, you're standing in a room that once felt like home, now echoing with silence. When the presence becomes an absence, you held on longer than you should have, because history has a way of lying to you, whispering that what once was is still what is. You remembered the laughter, the shared pain, the nights you swore you'd never leave each other behind. But memory is not the same as reality. And what's been draining you isn't the person, it's the version of them that no longer exists. So now you sit with that ache torn between what you knew and what you know now. And you ask yourself the question that always cuts the deepest. If I still love them, how can I walk away? Tweetable insight. Grief is not proof you should stay, it's proof that you felt something real before it broke. The fire metaphor. Here's the truth, love alone is not enough. You can love someone and still have to leave. You can miss someone and still know they can't come with you. You can feel the grief and still choose peace. And yes, it hurts. It hurts to close the door when your heart still presses its ear against it, hoping to hear a voice it once trusted. But there comes a time when you realize you've been sacrificing your own aliveness to keep something that's already gone. Grief is not weakness. It's not a sign that you failed or given up too soon. It's a scar of honesty that you showed up fully, that you felt deeply, and now that you are brave enough to let go with your eyes still wet. The threshold of peace. Letting go doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough to stop abandoning yourself for someone who no longer sees you. It means you stop shrinking to stay in rooms that can't hold your truth. It means you choose the unknown over the slow death of emotional starvation. And no, not everyone will understand. Some will call you cold, some will call you selfish. But they didn't see the nights you lay awake, holding on with hands that bled. They didn't feel the silence you swallowed, the words you buried, the hope you strangled just to keep the peace. You did your part. You stayed long after it stopped being safe. And now, the bravest thing you can do is leave. The quiet challenge, so take the grief, let it move through you. Don't rush it, don't numb it, don't apologize for it. But don't confuse it with a reason to stay, because grief is not a prison, it's a door. And behind it is peace, not the kind that demands silence or sacrifice, but the kind that makes your soul exhale, the kind you've earned. There's a kind of noise that doesn't come from the outside. It creeps in quietly through obligations, expectations, the constant pressure to explain yourself to people who never really listen. And one day you wake up exhausted, not from doing too much, but from carrying too many people's chaos inside your skin. When boundaries feel like betrayal, you've been taught to make space, to be kind, to understand. You've mastered the art of softening your edges so others can feel more comfortable inside your presence. But here's the cost they don't tell you about. Every time you shrink to avoid confrontation, you leave a piece of yourself behind. And peace, your peace, slips further and further out of reach. Because peace doesn't scream. It doesn't demand. It simply waits for you to come home to it. But home feels distant when your doors are always wide open and anyone can walk in dirty shoes, loud voices, and all. Tweetable insight. You can't be the sanctuary and the sacrifice at the same time. The fire metaphor, you have to learn to close the door. Not slam it, not lock it forever. Just close it, gently, firmly, and without apology. And yes, they'll notice. They'll ask why you're suddenly quiet, why you're not as available, not as easy to pull into their storms. They'll call it cold. But that's only because they were never meant to live inside your peace. They were just passing through and overstayed. There's a kind of power in stillness. Not the stillness that comes from defeat, but the one that rises when you finally choose yourself. When you no longer open the door just because someone knocks. When you learn that your light is sacred, not a porch lamp for every wandering soul to lean on. The room of your own. You don't need permission to protect your soul. You don't need validation to carve out space where your spirit can breathe again. Peace is not something you stumble into. It's a door, a room, a key, and you hold it. You decide who gets to come in, who gets to speak, who gets to stay. And you decide, most importantly, when the door must stay shut, not out of anger, but out of reverence. Because your well-being is not a community project. It's your birthright, and no one else will guard it for you if you don't first make it your own priority. The quiet challenge, so ask yourself, who are you still holding the door open for, even when they track mud across your soul? And then ask the harder question, what might change in your life if you closed it? Not forever, just for now. Long enough to hear your own thoughts again. Long enough to feel the quiet warmth of your own presence. Long enough to remember that peace isn't something you earn, it's something you allow. And you're allowed.